And so really pleased to welcome Sandra to the session today. So Sandra, for those who haven't met Sandra before, she's a business psychologist, executive coach, coach supervisor. She's also a member of our faculty teams involved in our coach training programs, and also oversees the accreditation aspect of our courses as well. So we refer to her as our chief examiner. So I'm really pleased you were available for this conversation today, Sandra.
Absolute pleasure.
Good. And Sandra and I met back in about 2004 or 5, I think, many years ago. And we have a saying at Catalyst, which is, the coaching is only ever as good as the coach. And I think the reason I'm sharing that phrase with you is for a number of reasons, really. One is I'm really pleased Sandra's involved in the accreditation of our programs, because the portfolio submission is really that understanding of who you are in terms of at the end of this learning process. But a second piece is really points to the purpose of this conversation today. As with any psychological model or lens, it's really useful to help us think about our clients, but fundamentally we always need to start with ourselves. And, part of our program is as much about the personal development and your learning as it is for the work you then do with others. So when we were looking at feedback and requests, and we had a number of requests around a webinar around exploring drivers from transactional analysis, I contacted Sandra because of her expertise in this area. So thanks again, Sandra.
Absolute pleasure.
And should we just start perhaps with a bit more about why this is useful for coaches? I mean, I'm going to ask a number of questions today, but let's start there, I think.
Yeah, so apart from my own excitement and passion in this whole area, I'm picking up on we've had earlier conversations around the program and so on, and the fact that our programs are very developmental, I think, is something that is a thread that will come through today's conversation that we're having. And also that as human beings, we have habits, we have patterns, we have styles, and they can serve us as individuals, as professionals, and as coaches, and sometimes they get in the way. So the view that I take of TA and TA drivers, that's the label that's given within particularly therapeutic TA, is the view that I take. It's very much of if you like, a layered perspective or even systemic view. And so first, as you've already raised, that in our quest to be in service and at our best as a coach requires us to be self-aware. So what are our own prompts that, if you like, influence us to say and or do something as compared to in other situations? So they may be ways of thinking, feeling, doing. What are those, as I say, triggers? And then how might they or do they impact ourselves and our view of ourselves as coaches, and indeed in our practice? There's that aspect. So there's that first. Then it's about, for me, given that I'm coming as I am as a coach, how is that informing? How is that influencing space that's between myself as coach and, say, you as client, Damion? And lastly, then how can I as coach serve to raise my clients' awareness of what's going on for them in terms of prompts or triggers? So that's the context for me, really, in terms of why I think this is an interesting topic.
I agree. And I think I'll just add to that as well. And that piece of understanding self, I'm sure when we start to, and some of these may be familiar, but when we start to explore the drivers, we can also look at culturally, the drivers potentially in the organization as well, and actually how they may be hooking us or the clients. So there's a systemic piece.
Exactly. So there's a system that's ourselves, the system that is our relationship with our client, and then it goes broader, organizationally, then breaking that back down, divisions, teams, departments. Yes.
So I think be helpful to get a bit of background, Sandra. But before you do, I just want to say, you know, as with any psychological model, I like to think of it as putting a pair of glasses on and seeing the world through those lenses. So I think it's really important that I just want to say, as always, this isn't the truth, but it is a helpful way of understanding our patterns of relating. So are you okay just sharing a bit of background with the group in terms of where these come from?
Well, very happy to. And I'd add to what you've said, that it's only one way of looking. There are so many myriad pairs of glasses one can put on. Okay, so TA drivers derives from the theory and therapeutic practice of transactional analysis. Transactional analysis of itself was in direct response to the psychoanalytic and psychodynamic movement, if you like, of that time. And back then, it would have been sitting within the context of originally working with clients, and this is my phrase, who were psychologically unwell. So the way that we're going to be talking about it today will be with people who are psychologically well, but it originated with people who are psychologically unwell. TA of itself is about transactions. So it's really focusing on the interactions within ourselves, as well as interactions within people. It differs from psychoanalysis, psychodynamic approaches, and that's what excites me, is because it starts out, it has three key principles. The first being that people are fundamentally okay. And what that means is that as individuals, they're worthy, they're of value, they have dignity. Secondly, that people have a capacity to think and to think for themselves. And thirdly, that people make decisions for themselves. They're capable of doing that, and that those decisions can change. They're not set in stone. So in that sense, I see a clear parallel with the principles of coaching. You know, the whole fact of the matter that people come with potential, that our role as coach is to facilitate that. So a transactional analysis practitioner is to facilitate, to enable. A TA practitioner is very open in terms of sharing, including notes, so I understand so it's coming from a place of equivalence. And lastly, I love the language, because the language is simple. It was intended for clients to be able to access and understand during the therapeutic conversation. So that's the context of TA. Now, TA drivers stemming from that was developed in the early 70s by somebody called Kahler, Kahler. And essentially he was saying that there are 5 characteristic styles, if you like. And those styles are a reflection of, they derive from messages that each of us have received over our lifetimes. And it's about having had those messages in our desire to be viewed positively, that we have developed over time these strategies, what are called strategies, these approaches, in order to be okay, based on playing out those strategies. So if you like, it's a conditional okayness. All right. Okay.
Yeah. And so I suppose what's connecting to me is often, you know, as a coach, that sort of space we're trying to create is I'm okay, you're okay, that okayness. So we're trying to hold a client in a place of meeting them where they are, but actually they're okay. And the reality of these strategies you know, can be helpful, but that driver bit around when too much of something becomes overplayed, potentially, you know, especially when I'm under stress, which, you know, in certain situations as a coach, I may be under pressure, under stress. So it's helpful to think about, so what happens then in terms of me needing to be okay? Where do I go?
Precisely. So whereas, let's play with that. Can we play with that just a little bit more? So whereas in terms of its original positioning, drivers, because that would have been the badge that's used, and that's my word, badge, the label that's used, they would have been seen as dysfunctional aspects of messages that we've received over our lifetime. So if you like, they pertain to our negative self-talk and therefore our inner game. What I'm hearing you say, and that's the way that I work with this too, is that whilst I ask myself, because I have these as well, what are the underpinning forces or influences that when I'm feeling less resourced, when I'm feeling stuck, when I'm feeling pressured, because this is my knee jerk, in their less extreme form, they can serve us. But as you say, when we're in overdrive, forgive the pun, it becomes dysfunctional. It becomes a driver. So the stance that you and I are taking, and the stance I'd like to take today in our conversation, is really more akin, aligns with Julie Hayes' work, who, as a psychotherapist of many years, consultant and coach, looks at it from more of a developmental perspective. And there is actually an arm of TA that's developmental TA, so it's not about pathology. Okay.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And you know, I think this is great. I just want to say, as I'm listening, that's great. We can have a theoretical understanding of this, but I hope what we can create in this conversation is some awareness around what are our habits, what are our drivers, you know, our working styles, you know.
Yes.
Should we go into that conversation, Sandra, around what they are? So if there are 5, if you're okay giving us a view of each of them.
Yes, but playing again, and I recognise I'm using this word play all the time, a lot, purposely actually, is inviting our audience in some involvement, in some playful experimentation. So whilst you're listening to me go through these 5, actually asking yourself, what's flagging up for you? What's resonating with you? And coming at that from a more of a felt sense and gut, your intuition, rather than detailed rationalizing, because, you know, we haven't got the time for that. But first of all, if I just give you the badges, again, that's my word first. Be perfect, be strong, please others, hurry up, and try hard. And you may even like to put those on a scale of 1 to 10 for those 5. And let's go through those. So, as Damion and I have said, strengths and overplays when we're in overdrive. So the strengths of a be perfect are organized person, attention to detail, high standards. Who wouldn't want high standards? But high standards, achieving, i.e. completing something, completing the task. When we're in overdrive, so ultra organized, the attention to detail is minute, etc., etc., we can be quite hard on ourselves and possibly also on other people. We can lose focus because we're so into the detail, we've forgotten the wood. We're there amongst the trees. The language that can creep in can be, with tonation included, the ought and should be this way or that way. And a tendency to jump to judgment. Yeah, so those are the stresses, those are the strengths, those are potential downsides. Okay, so that might be triggering for some people.
smile because obviously, not obviously, but it's something I recognize in terms of myself, my practice. The be perfect is definitely one.
Well,
I know.
I'm more than happy to share mine, and that is quite a pronounced one, driver for me, as you know, Damion. Right, so moving on. So be strong. The strengths are they, in their communication, that they can appear very cognitive. They're strong thinkers. They're calm, impassive, facially. And they're good at structure and logical processes. So be strong might be saying, oh, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, in terms of communication style. In terms of potential downsides of a be strong, person with a be strong, is that they can at least appear, if not actually be, quite emotionally distant. Their language can be impersonal, so they objectify. So, for example, it is cold as opposed to I'm cold, or one should as opposed to I should or ought or could. That they won't show, they find it really difficult to show vulnerability or emotions to others, particularly those emotions which are felt, they feel are weak. And I'm putting that in parentheses. And they also find it hard, even when they're asked to express needs or their feelings. And as for asking for help, a no. Find that very challenging to do. So that's be strong. Please others are individuals with that working style or driver, value harmony. They want everybody to be happy and included. They're highly empathic, great listeners, always there, ready to listen, and very flexible in accommodating others. So what are the potential downsides here? Please others, people, our own needs come last. We submerge our needs in order to gratify what we may actually assume are other people, those of other people, belong to other people. We can rescue, so we jump in to save. So we're prone to being a rescuer. And again, in terms of our own needs, find it hard to express those, hard to ask for what we want. And particularly if feedback is non-specific, then we can get quite easily hurt by criticism, what we perceive as criticism. Hurry-ups. Hurry-ups are literally that. They do things quickly. They think, they talk, they act fast, and they multitask. Are some of the strengths of a hurry-up. Some of the potential downsides are, because they're hurrying up, that's part of the buzz, if you like. So they're leaving things to the last minute. They rush to finish, which then leaves people prone to possible errors and mistakes. And because everything's done at a pace, it can appear superficial. Lastly, tryhards. As strengths, tryhards, it's about input. So there's the energy, there's the enthusiasm. They like innovation and ideas and initiating things. Again, it's about input, and may well have a wide-ranging spectrum of interests. In terms of potential weaknesses, they get bored quickly. Non-completion of tasks, things get partially started and not finished. Follow-up may be weak. Because it's about input, they may well prefer reward, praise, feedback for effort rather than the actual outcome. they may well procrastinate or defer rather than getting on with it. Okay, so those are some of the, if you like, markers. And again, that's my words.
Yeah, and I'm listening. I'm recognizing a couple of friends.
Like that word.
Yeah, I'm wondering what the group. I mean, again, if this is landing, if you've got questions that are emerging for you, please add those to the chat panel, just so we can get a sense of how this is resonating for you. So again, I'd say the encouragement is to be compassionate and non-judgmental about yourself, especially if you've got to be perfect driver. Just that sort of sense of, oh, I'm wondering what's here, you know, what am I noticing about myself? Noticing, you know, the helpful side of this, the working style, but also the too much of a good thing, you know, where it becomes a driver.
So let's give just a minute or two, Damion, if we can.
Yeah, just see if there's any reflections. Yeah. So if you have got any reflection, I see one coming through from Ali there, saying that she's done a score of them all, which is a good capture. So there obviously are questionnaires that you can fill out, but the encouragement for Sandra is that sense, what's the felt sense of this? Because that's the important bit. As you hear the words, what's resonating for you, knowing yourself.
And what I like about sharing this in a more qualitative way, so I'm just reading. So I'll come back to those, Damion. Please remind me if I don't. That's my Be Perfect clicking in. Why I like the qualitative aspect of it is that, you know, by and large, we hear some of these statements, we think, oh, that sounds a bit like me, or that resonates. And yes, there are questionnaires, and one of the questionnaires that is in Julie Hayes' book, Transactional Analysis for Trainers, quite brief. So it provides a little bit more structure. On the point of people saying, oh, I can see myself in all of them. Yes, that's highly applicable and possible. The tendency is that, so it is said, that while we each have a bit of all these drivers, there may be 2 or 3 that are more pronounced than others. So in fact, in terms of a knee-jerk, they would be the ones that arrive first.
So Sandra, yes. I'm conscious of our time, and I suppose yes. I want to sort of help the group think about the so what bit, but also how they may relate to these in perhaps a more resourceful way, more responsive way. Okay. So what are your thoughts around how you work with these?
For those of you that work with me, you'll know I love alliteration. So it's what I call my 5 A's, the 5 A's. So, and it's very much akin to Hayes's developmental perspective rather than symbolizing underlying pathology. So it's coming back to you, Damion, about treating this with lightness and with compassion. So having raised awareness, I've noticed something in myself, because we're still sticking with ourselves as coaches. I've noticed it. It's actually about acknowledging that. And for me, it's about another A, accepting. So learning to become more comfortable with, this is who I am. So the acknowledgement is about saying these styles, these patterns are part of who I am, part of who you are. It's your personality, it's your character, it's how you interact with others in terms of your behavior, the ways you communicate, remembering that it comes from transactional analysis, and that's what that's about. So in becoming more comfortable with them, it's about accepting that working style, Hayes's label or driver, for what it is and how it can serve me as a coach, whilst also recognizing that there are potential negative downsides, particularly if as a coach I'm under stress or pressure. So it might be when I'm in the early stages of rapport and trust building with a client that I might be in awe of. Yeah, that could be a potential trigger. Or my client, I've been working with them for a while and they're still seeming rather resistant to anything that I've tried. Or they may have different values and motivations, or be openly emotional. So it's in the acceptance of. So I then think of the repertoire, if you like, of drivers and working styles and align it to subpersonalities. Yeah, so in managing that subpersonality, in managing that working style, how do I turn the volume down for myself, furthermore, before working with clients, whilst also staying alert to the flags that may flare up when I'm under stress? Is that making sense, Damion?
Yeah, it is. It is. And if I share something personal around so be perfect, as I said, is one of my drivers, and I know how I experience that when I'm in the grip of be perfect, and the way, apart from my mindfulness and being able to take a breath, is I say to myself, I'm enough. In those moments, I will say I'm enough, or this is enough, meaning me and the client and the work we're doing. And that enables me to go back to, in this language, mindful adult, in terms of being present and available.
Exactly. And I think that, well, we're moving into TA more now, but as you say, mindful adult being an ego state within TA. So accessing our drivers from adult is very different to being in our own critical parent and having these negative self-talk messages just flaring up that have been going on for as I say, from our lifetimes. Just to share one of my Be Perfects, and it goes to show that high standards, it's about your individual definition of high standards. Jeanette was kind enough to compliment me on my red cardigan, and I've touched my ear, and I've forgotten to put my earrings in. My Be Perfect flared up, but turn the volume down. So it can be about anything. Okay, so moving on
we've got a couple of minutes, Sandra. Yeah. So again, just in terms of thinking about how people work with this.
Moving to self-management, and I think that's an ongoing journey. There are, for each of these drivers or working styles, in turning that volume down, you started to touch upon it, Damion, was what I call allowances or antidotes. Yeah? So Be Perfect, you're good enough as you are. I'm enough. So that might be, as a coach, part of your self-preparation as grounding. Not this is enough, I'm enough. Looking at yourselves in terms of the strengths and appreciative inquiry perspective in your pre-reflection preparation and your post-reflection. Be Strongs is about expressing your feelings. That may the relational aspects coming out in contracting, perhaps. Please Others is about recognizing that you count, so please yourself. Again, maybe perhaps coming around in contracting, the relational aspects, the boundary management, whether you decide, how you decide to work with a client or not. Try hards is just do it. Persevering with a model or technique, seeing the start of a session, the middle of a session, the end to a session, with each of those aspects pertaining to the awareness, responsibility and choice of your client. How's it serving them? That's output. And Hurry Up is about slowing down, taking your time. As you pointed out, Damion, the grounding that we do at the start for ourselves, our self-care, our presence as coach, and as well as in applying the tools and techniques that we do when we're working with our clients.
Thank you, Sandra, for sharing those. And again, I hope they may just spark some thoughts around some other ways of, meeting these friends and being with them. So they're one part, they're one voice in an orchestra of voices, so how can we relate to them differently? So Sandra, just anything else, any final, I appreciate I'm cutting this short because of time, but any final reflections you would share to the group around this?
Yes, very quickly, and you're going to see me using my fingers, so Be Perfect. We all have these working styles, all these drivers. So it's, as coaches, holding them in a way that serves you and therefore your client. It's about applying this aspect of the theory with a light touch. Be playful. Thirdly, it's a question of balance, as with any quality or strength. And lastly, about treating ourselves as coaches with kindness and compassion. So that's the self-care piece, as we do with our clients. Those are the 4 things I love to reinforce.
Yeah, and reflective practice being such an important part of this, being able to recognize it, because we won't notice it in the moment. It's going to be after the session we'll notice that familiar feeling, which will be a sense that this is potentially playing out. So thank you, Sandra. I just want to say to the group before we bring the session to a close, our next webinar is going to be on the 8th of November at 1 o'clock, and I'll be in a conversation with an executive coach and coach supervisor, Julia Manor, and she's going to be talking about her new book, which is all around grief in coaching, and loss in disguise is the title of the webinar. So thanks for dialing in as always. I hope there's some useful reflections for you to take away. Thanks again, Sandra. Anything else you'd like to say to the group just to close the session down?
Thank you very much, and thank you for being playful, and trust they're of use. It's of use. Bye-bye for now. Take care.